I was having a baby.
You look really good, Liz. You look really good.
Congratulations.
We'll talk more about that during prayer time.
Okay. Jesus revealed who he was.
Yes, how?
In the synagogue, he was teaching in the synagogue, and at first it seemed like people accepted him, but then they turned on him after he said some partial words.
Yes. Which synagogue? Where was he?
His hometown.
Yeah, he's in Nazareth with his hometown, so everybody recognizes him. I was going to say they know who he is, but I think it's more that they think they know who he is. Who do they think he is?
They think he's the son of Joseph,
And who is he actually?
the son of God.
And that makes all the difference in his agenda. So his agenda and theirs are not the same because they don't understand who he is. Now, Jesus introduced himself, or more specifically, he introduced his ministry by what he said in the synagogue. Do you remember what he said? Yeah, so what did he say from Isaiah? This is actually going to define, this is going to be the lens through which we interpret everything that Jesus does in his ministry is these words from Isaiah. So what are the words from Isaiah that he used to talk about himself and what he come to do?
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to teach the acceptable year of the Lord.
Yes. Now all of that, we're going to see that worked out in practice in all the things that Jesus is going to do now starting today in the passage that we look at. So he says he's the fulfillments of those prophecies from Isaiah. He's the one who has the Spirit on him. You notice how many times Luke has mentioned now that the Spirit is on him? It's a fulfillment of those prophecies about the coming of the Messiah, the servant of the Lord, that he will come in the power of the Spirit because he's been chosen by God, anointed by him for a particular purpose. So if he's going to preach good news to the poor, release for the captives, sight for the blind, freedom for the oppressed, well, we would expect to start seeing that now in the things that Jesus is going to do, and that is what we're going to see today. So, well, he read all that whole passage from Isaiah, and then was like, and here I am. I don't know how the people understood that, but it was pretty heavy what he was saying. And also the acceptable year of the Lord, or the year of the Lord's favor, which is a phrase that's used in the Old Testament to refer to the year of Jubilee. So you think about the Jubilee and everything that happened during that year, all the different kinds of freedom that came for God's people through the year of Jubilee. And here's Jesus saying, okay, I'm here. That's what's come now, is the year of Jubilee. But what does that mean? It's going to be a Jubilee year on a scale nobody is thinking about, because it's not about physical debts. It's not about freedom from physical prisons. It's about sin and death and Satan. That's what Jesus has come for. Freedom on a much bigger scale than anybody's looking. Okay, so after that, the people of Nazareth seemed like they were on board with Jesus, but then things didn't go well. Do you remember what Jesus said to them? They're saying nice stuff about him, but they think he's Joseph's son, and he's actually not. How did he provoke them?
It looks like he said, I wasn't here, but it looks like he said that they were going to tell him to do what he did at home that he did elsewhere, like the miracles.
Yeah. So their assumption is that because he's from their town, they should be the ones who are the specific beneficiaries of his ministry. Well, now, if he were the son of Joseph, maybe that would be true, but he's not. He's the son of God. And so they just have a complete misunderstanding of his ministry and what he's come to do. He hasn't come to do miracles for the people who are privileged to grow up in the same town as him. He has come to proclaim good news, the good news of the kingdom. And they want the miracles for themselves, but Jesus has different priorities. So then he makes this reference to, he continues to provoke them. What else does he say?
He quotes a proverb that says no prophet is accepted in his hometown.
In other words, You think you like me, but you don't really. Yeah, yep. And then what?
He talked about the Gentiles that God came to and healed.
Yeah, using that as this comparison, as if to say, look at the Old Testament and examples of Elijah and Elisha and how God passed over the faithless in Israel to save the Gentiles. That makes them mad because the implication is they're the ones who are faithless and God is going to pass over them to heal and to minister to people that they're not expecting, people even that they would despise, maybe even Gentiles. How do they respond to that, the people of Nazareth?
They wanted to kill him.
Yep, they don't just say, well, you know what, we're done with you. No, they try to kill him. And how does that go?
Mass confusion.
They lose him.
God's time yet.
It's not God's time yet. That's right. So they lose him. They're trying to, they took him to a cliff. They were going to push him over. And he just walks through the crowd because it's not God's time yet. Okay.
I'm surprised they let him take him to the cliff. That he let them take him to the cliff.
Yeah. But we mentioned last week how it's kind of interesting the last temptation that Satan put to Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Which was to stand at the highest point of the temple, which I think is the Temple Mount, where there's a man-made cliff that goes into the Kidron Valley. And Satan said, okay, now throw yourself off it and see if God will save you, and Jesus wouldn't do it. But right here, what you see is God saving Jesus from the cliff. Not because Jesus tested him, but because Jesus is doing his will. So he didn't have to prove himself to Satan. Here's the Father looking after his Son, and here's Jesus just pursuing the agenda. Okay, anything else you want to mention from last week? Okay, so let's look at the section that comes next. With all that in the background, everything we're going to look at today is connected to all that stuff from last week and from the week before. So, chapter 4, verse 31. Then he went down to Capernaum, a town in Galilee, and on the Sabbath began to teach the people. They were amazed at his teaching because his message had authority. In the synagogue there was a man possessed by a demon, an evil spirit. He cried out at the top of his voice, "Ha! What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," Jesus said sternly. "Come out of him." Then the demon threw the man down before them all and came out without injuring him. All the people were amazed and said to each other, "What is this teaching? With authority and power he gives orders to evil spirits and they come out." And the news about him spread throughout the surrounding area. Jesus left the synagogue and went to the home of Simon. Now Simon's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever, and they asked Jesus to help her. So he bent over and rebuked the fever, and it left her. She got up at once and began to wait on them. When the sun was setting, the people brought to Jesus all who had various kinds of sickness, and laying his hands on each one, he healed them. Moreover, demons came out of many people, shouting, "You are the Son of God." But he rebuked them and would not allow them to speak, because they knew he was the Christ. At daybreak, Jesus went out to a solitary place. The people were looking for him, and when they came to where he was, they tried to keep him from leaving them. But he said, "I must preach the good news of the kingdom of God to the other towns also, because that is why I was sent." And he kept on preaching in the synagogues of Judea. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, with the people crowding around him and listening to the word of God, he saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on you will catch men." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. Okay, so what does Jesus do after leaving Nazareth in verse 31? He goes to Capernaum. Now, based on what he said about Capernaum last week, you should be expecting some interesting things to happen here. Okay, so what does he do when he gets to Capernaum?
Teaches on the Sabbath.
Yep, it's a Sabbath day, so he goes into the synagogue, to teach the people. And what's their response? In 32.
They were amazed at his teaching
Why?
because he had words of authority.
That's right. When it says they're amazed, that word might better be translated disturbed, because it's not really clear yet whether it's a positive reaction, but they know there's something going on right here. Jesus clearly doesn't teach the same way as the teachers of the law, because the teachers of the law typically relied on precedent and on the traditions of the elders for their interpretation and application of Scripture. Jesus never does that. He never appeals to another authority to give him authority. He always teaches in a way that presents himself and his words as authoritative, which makes total sense if you know who he is. Okay, so he's teaching in this synagogue, and what happens in 33 to 35?
There was a man possessed by a demon spirit.
And what does he do?
A voice cried out loudly, "Go away! What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? You are the Holy One of God."
Now, it's interesting that right there in a synagogue, there's a man with this spirit, and it's an unclean spirit. It's literally a spirit of an unclean demon. And this man cries out at the top of his voice because, unlike the people, the spirit recognizes Jesus. I mean, did you notice that Jesus didn't introduce himself? I don't think. But what does he say about him? He knows that this is Jesus of Nazareth. He already knows who he is. And then when he says, you know, what do you have to do with us? Have you come to destroy us? Well, has he?
No.
Yes. I mean, in the short term, he's not going to obliterate him, but isn't that what Jesus has done? Is to defeat?
Destroy the demon.
Yeah, not the man. Not the man, no, not us. But the spirits, the evil spirits, he's absolutely come to do battle with the spirits of Satan. And the fact that the Spirit calls him the Holy One of God. Now that's interesting, that he doesn't just call him powerful, but the Holy One. What does this Spirit have to know about Jesus to say all those things about him? Yeah, which is what the people are not getting yet, but the Spirit totally knows who Jesus is. He knows who he's facing when Jesus comes into this synagogue, even though the people haven't yet figured that out.
And so does Jesus, when he says be quiet right there, does Jesus not want them to know yet?
No, and we'll kind of come back to that when we get to Simon's mother-in-law in just a second.
Okay.
So just hold that question for a minute. Yeah. So when Jesus confronts the Spirit, then, how does it go? There's this long, drawn-out battle, right? And there's this negotiation, and who's going to win? No, how does it go?
Yeah, they obey him.
He just says the word.
It's
Be quiet.
immediately.
Yeah.
It's like Jesus doesn't even lift a pinky, you know? It's just, he just says it, and the battle's over right there. There's no need for anything long and drawn out because of who Jesus is, because he is the Son of God, the Holy One, empowered by the Spirit, who's greater than any evil spirit that might come against him. So he says the word and it happens. He just orders the spirit to be quiet and come out, and it does. It throws the man down in the process, but it leaves him uninjured. This confrontation with an evil spirit is concise, it's decisive, and it demonstrates, again, something profound about who Jesus is. And by the way, it's not uncommon for the translations to call it an evil spirit. My translation does that as well, and that's true. But literally what it says is that it's an unclean spirit.
Impure.
Impure, that's right. And the reason that matters is because in the Mosaic law, everything that was associated with death or the demonic was considered unclean and unable to coexist with the holiness of God. There's a deliberate contrast between unclean spirits and the Holy Spirit. The contrast between what's unclean and what's holy is important because everything associated with Satan is unclean and headed toward death. And everything associated with God is holy and headed toward life. And so the unclean, the mention of the Spirit as being unclean sets it in direct contrast to the Spirit of God because it's holy.
And in the synagogue.
And in the synagogue.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
And it could be present with Christ.
That's right. When you know from the Old Testament law, you know when unclean things came in contact with the permanent holiness of God, how did it go? bad for them, right? For anything that was unclean. That's when the sparks started to fly. So if Jesus is the Holy One of God, and it's interesting, that's what the Spirit calls him. Not the mighty one of God, although he is, but the Holy One. If Jesus, as the holy presence of God, walks into that synagogue, you should not expect an unclean spirit to leave unscathed. The holiness of God is going to drive out what's unclean, and that's what you see happen with Jesus. And it doesn't even take a big act of power or might to do it. So, why do you think this miracle is the first one that Luke records for us?
Evil versus good.
Mm-hmm. And who comes out on top?
Good. Jesus.
Jesus, and it doesn't take much effort at all, right? So it demonstrates something very profound about who Jesus is. Because again, who do people think he is? Yeah.
Child of Joseph.
What son of Joseph could sit there and do that? And they've heard from the Spirit himself who Jesus is, and then they've seen the Spirit, Jesus do something to the Spirit that demonstrates who he is. So you know that Jesus is not going around saying to everybody, I'm God. Because if he did that, they'd stone him for blasphemy. But everything he's doing and everything he's saying is another way of telling the people he is God. And the miracle that he does right here makes it very clear. Not just that he can do miraculous things, but that he has an authority how powerful is he? How much authority does he have? He's got authority over Satan. He's got authority over all the minions of Satan. Who has that kind of authority without praying? I mean, that's the interesting thing is maybe there were prophets before him who could do that if they prayed, but Jesus doesn't pray. He just acts like he's the one who's got the power over all these spirits, and that's because he does, because of who he is. So, the Son of God clearly has no parallel with anyone who came before him, because he's God in human form. No one in the Old Testament had the kind of power or authority or holiness that Jesus does. He's in a whole different order, and the very first miracle he does makes that clear. Also, think about that prophecy from Isaiah that we looked at last week. When Isaiah prophesied about freedom and release and the year of the Lord's favor, do you think this is the kind of release that people were thinking about? No. This is release, but it is on a cosmic scale. This is way bigger than letting somebody out of prison, because Jesus has just released somebody in a way that nobody else is capable of releasing someone. Only God can accomplish this kind of release. So freedom for the oppressed has begun, the way it's prophesied in Isaiah, but the Messiah is about much bigger things than anybody was looking at. Okay, now how do the people react in verses 36?
They get their cell phones out and call.
Guess what we saw?
That's right, they're posting on Facebook. That's
It's
right.
amazing how fast they spread.
That's right. Yep, they're amazed or disturbed or alarmed, whatever that word means. They're worked up. So here's this man who has unique power and authority in his teaching, but it's not just his teaching. Now, the miracle that he just did in commanding the Spirit demonstrates the same authority that he's using to teach in a way that's completely different from the teachers of the law or the Pharisees. So after the events at the synagogue, now news is spreading about him everywhere. The people might not understand who he is, but everybody is talking about him. Okay, now what happens next in verses 38 and 39?
Jesus left the synagogue and went to the home of Simon.
Mm-hmm. Simon being Peter, and what happens at Peter's house?
His mother-in-law is sick.
Yeah, that seems kind of mundane, doesn't it? After all the excitement of that spirit at the synagogue, now he just goes to Peter's house, and it turns out his mother-in-law is sick in bed with a high fever. But it's serious, whatever it is, it's a serious illness. So when Jesus arrives at the house, they ask him to help her. What does he do? How does he do it?
He rebukes the fever.
That's interesting, because Luke just used the same word for that fever that he used for the evil spirit. That Jesus just bends over, rebukes the fever, and it's gone. Again, there's no rigmarole, there's no magic ritual, there's no prayer. Jesus just says it with authority, and it's done. And how much better is she?
She gets up immediately.
Starts serving them.
Yeah, she starts doing the hospitality for all the guests that are there, right? Now, why would it mention that? I think it's in order to make it clear, she's not half healed, right? She's not like slightly better. She's completely healed.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to go rest for a while for this healing to be finished. It's just, Jesus says it and it's done. And this is an interesting contrast to the previous miracle, because this one is private, undramatic, quiet, unspectacular. It's just Jesus having compassion for his friends. But it still shows that unparalleled power and authority of Jesus, that he can rebuke an illness the same way he rebukes an evil spirit. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the fever's caused by a demon possession. It could be, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that the authority to drive out unclean spirits is the same authority that drives out physical disease. Jesus has got all the authority, and he can use it to do anything he wants. And so here he is, showing them another outworking of Isaiah 61. Didn't he just free another captive? By healing this woman who had a very serious illness?
Yeah.
So oppression comes in a whole variety of forms, with spiritual forces that people are helpless to overcome, physical diseases they're helpless to overcome, but Jesus has the power over all of that, to release people from any and every kind of bondage. And again, who has that kind of power? Except God.
Did Jesus know Simon at this time? He just walks in this house?
It seems, yeah. It is a small town.
Everybody knows everybody.
It
Everybody knows everybody.
does seem like
Probably not.
when you read the other gospel accounts, it does seem like he already knows Peter.
Doesn't he know us all?
Well, but there's also an indication in other gospel accounts that he ends up staying with Peter. At some point, he's actually staying in Peter's house. So, I don't know how well acquainted they are at this point, but I think the implication is he's probably going back to where he's staying when he goes to Simon's house, or maybe Simon's just invited him over.
But didn't they all, people then and there, just kind of do that kind of thing? They invited strangers into their home. A lot of them did, didn't they?
Well, I'm not sure if they did just with strangers, but I think if there was a rabbi or a teacher that you
Yeah.
were listening to, or that you were interested in, somebody you wanted to hear more from, it probably would not have been unusual to say, hey, come have lunch with us, or come hang around.
I don't think they had hotels and campgrounds like.
No,
No.
that's true.
They didn't have RV parks. They didn't have RV parks.
They didn't.
Is this not necessarily chronological then?
No, he's not. He's going to rearrange a whole bunch of things, yeah. He's stringing things together because of the theme that he's following, rather than the time. The time. Now, what happens in the evening in verses 40 and 41?
Sick people began to come,
Yes,
be healed.
and it says at sunset. Why at sunset?
Took him that long to hear.
Because that's when our cortisol drops and everybody goes to the ER.
Exactly.
What day is it?
Clinic's closed.
What day is it?
Sabbath.
It's a Sabbath.
Oh, yeah, so they could come to the
Yeah,
Sabbath day.
everything that's just been described here is on one day.
Oh.
There's been no change of scene.
Mm-mm.
So he started
So this
teaching
is
in the
the end of the
synagogue
day.
on the Sabbath. On the same day, he went to Peter's mother-in-law, healed her. Now the Sabbath has come to an end. And when the Sabbath ends at sunset, that's when all the chaos breaks loose. Because as long as the Sabbath is going, people can't carry each other. They can only travel short distances. But once sunset comes, now everybody can do everything they want to do. And what do?
They want to get healed.
Oh man, they're just bringing crowds of people, right? They're bringing all these people to Jesus to be healed. And he's laying hands on them and he's healing people. What a day this is. And not only is he healing all these sick people, but demons are coming out of people and they're shouting that he's the Son of God. Okay, now back to what you said before, Liz. They are right about that. He is the Son of God. But how does he respond?
He doesn't allow him to
He
speak.
doesn't, yeah.
Because they knew that he was the Messiah. Now that's interesting. Does that seem a little counterintuitive? I mean, doesn't he want everybody to know he's the Son of God and the Messiah?
Not through words.
Okay, why not yet, and why not through them?
Well, they're evil.
They're evil. He doesn't need the help of Satan's minions
No.
to tell everybody who he
No.
is. He's going to do it in his own time and in his own way.
Okay.
The other thing too is that term Messiah, it has some political connotations among a lot of the people of Israel and even among some of the Romans. What kind of Messiah are they looking for?
An
Someone to
earthly one.
throw over Rome.
That's right. They're looking for somebody who's going to come and defeat Caesar and Rome and do all the political stuff they want to do. They're looking for a freedom, a release that's political. What has Jesus come for? Spiritual release, which is way bigger. But he's not going to just fit into their idea of what the Messiah should do or who he should be. And so he doesn't come proclaiming to them, I'm the Messiah, because then they're going to have all of these expectations of him that aren't right. What he's going to do is through his ministry, he's going to reshape their understanding of what the Messiah is intended to do. That he's about a much bigger kind of release than what they're expecting. So he's not only not going to fit into their expectations, but I think he also wants to stay off the radar of the Roman authorities, because if word starts going around that the Jews are about to crown a new king, he's going to get the attention of people he doesn't want yet. Now that day's coming when Rome will pay attention, but that's not the attention he wants right now. So he's going to reveal himself as the Messiah, but he's going to do it on his terms, not on anybody else's, and he doesn't need Satan to help him do it. So release from this sort of bondage is an important part of his ministry, but it's actually not the main point, all of this, even the stuff that's going on with the miracles. Well, let's keep going. So, what a day it is, and it sounds like all night too. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they slept. It doesn't say what they did or not, but the chaos is crazy. So what happens in the morning in verse 42?
They left.
What does Jesus do?
Goes out to a solitary place, he goes out by himself.
And Luke doesn't say it here, but Mark does, that he goes out to a solitary place to pray. That's the reason he seeks out places to be alone, is so that he
Right.
can pray. Now, why would he do that? Do you think he's just tired? He probably is, but do you think there's some other reason why he would go off by himself and pray?
To commune with the Father and the Spirit.
That's right. And I think in the context, that's important, that he stops to commune with the Father and the Spirit, because the acclamation of the crowds might very well present a temptation for him to detour from God's purposes. When everybody starts coming and he's doing all this stuff that makes him very popular, and everybody's crowding around saying, do more of that, the easiest thing in the world would be to say, okay, let's just do more. Look how everybody likes it. Look how the crowds are gathering. But that's not what he's been sent for. It's just to gather crowds of people who want to see miracles. Now, his response to this overnight celebrity is not just to revel in the success of being popular. It's to remove himself from it, to talk to the Father. But then what do the people do? They won't leave him alone, right? They come out and find him, and they try to prevent him from leaving. Now, I can understand that, that the people have seen all these miracles. They want him to come back and just pick up where he left off. And that might sound nice, but it's actually a problem. What does Jesus say in verse 43?
He tells them that he needs to go and spread the good news to other towns.
That's the Father's agenda, and so it's the Son's agenda too.
Right.
Proclamation of the good news, that's Jesus' priority, which is right in line with what he said in the synagogue when he read that prophecy from Isaiah 61 last week. The healings and the miracles are important, but they're not an end in themselves. They're a means to an end, the goal being the revelation of God's salvation. That's where ultimate freedom and release are found. It's not in the physical healings, but in the spiritual restoration that those things point to because of who Jesus is and what he's come to do on the cross. So he could just camp out here and do miracles and everybody would love him. But that's not the agenda of the Father. That's not the mission he's been sent for. So he leaves Capernaum and he travels around and he continues preaching in the synagogues throughout that whole region. Okay, now, before we look at chapter 5, you notice throughout this whole section, Luke repeatedly emphasizes the authority of Jesus. I wonder if he noticed again the connection to his time in the wilderness. What if the temptations that Satan put to Jesus was to say, if you bow down and worship me, I'll give you authority over all the kingdoms of the world. Now, in this little section right here, I mean, you think about that temptation. Jesus could have just said to Satan, I'll show you authority, zap, right? But he didn't. He quoted Deuteronomy, didn't fall for the whole temptation Satan was putting to him, but also didn't demonstrate that he had power over Satan. He just trusted the agenda of the Father. And yet right now, in this section, what are you seeing about the kind of authority that Jesus has? How much does he have?
All power.
Including power over Satan, right? Now think about the irony of that temptation. When Satan said, if you're the Son of God, bow down and worship me and I'll give you all the authority. And Jesus said, no, I won't. Because the scripture says, worship the Lord alone. But right here what you're seeing is Jesus doesn't need that authority. He's already got it. But he exercises that authority in the Father's timing, not in Satan's timing. So he doesn't need Satan to give him any authority. He's got authority over Satan himself. What could Satan possibly give him that he doesn't already have? So again, it's another temptation of Satan that's answered now in the ministry of Jesus because he's following the Father's mission, doing it the Father's way in the Father's time. Now, so that's two temptations of Satan that have been dealt with in the story. The only one that was left now is the miraculous provision of food. I wonder what's coming next. Right? Now, how does chapter 5 open in verses 1 to 3?
Jesus was speaking to the people.
Mm-hmm.
They were pushing them into the lake.
It's crowded. So chapter 5, we get this change of scene. But this episode with Simon Peter right here is related to everything we've been looking at in chapter 4. So he's traveling around preaching. One day he's standing on the shore of Lake Gennesaret, which is another name for the Sea of Galilee. So he's at the Sea of Galilee. The people are crowding around him. They're listening to the Word of God. That's a good thing. But it's challenging because there's a whole bunch of them. So what does Jesus do?
He gets in the boat.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't they get in the boat?
They weren't pushed out before they realized what he was doing.
Weren't enough of them.
So there's a couple of fishing boats that are sitting there empty because the fishermen are washing their nets. Now, I didn't know this, but because of the particular type of nets that they use to fish, the fishermen on the Sea of Galilee typically did their fishing at night because then the fish can't see the net in the water.
Oh,
If you do it during the day, the fish can see the nets that they're using, but you do it at night, they can't see it.
Okay.
So they would go out at night and do their fishing, and then during the day, they would prepare their nets, take home their fish, wash everything, probably go sleep, come back out at night and do it again. So that's why the boats are sitting there while the fishermen are doing this other work, because they've already been out fishing during the night. So Jesus commandeers one of the boats, the one that belongs to his friend Simon, and asks him to put out a little way from shore. So that gives Jesus some space, and it also probably makes it easier for the people to hear him as he's teaching. I mean, if you're in a bay, it creates a sort of natural kind of amphitheater. So now the people can hear him and he's not being crowded. Now, what does Jesus say in verse 4?
Put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch.
Yes. And who's he talking to?
Good old Simon.
Good old Simon. Here's Peter. Yep. So Jesus finishes his teaching, he finishes speaking, and then he just turns to Simon in particular and tells him, okay, let's go fishing. And how does Peter respond to that?
We've been working all night, we're tired.
I really wish we could hear his tone of voice right here.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that would be.
I don't know what's going on, but
We hear it all through this.
He said, I will, because you said to.
yeah, that's right. He's respectful, and he calls Jesus master, which is similar to calling him sir. So he is being respectful. But Peter's a professional fisherman, and he knows what he's doing. And you kind of get the sense maybe he doesn't appreciate getting advice from an amateur. You know, like if the men were out fishing all night and didn't catch anything, it's total nonsense to think they'd now go out and catch something during the day. That's totally the wrong time to be fishing. But because Jesus says to do it, Peter agrees. Now, I don't know if Peter's response is like, because you say so, or if it's more like, okay, but because you say, I don't know. I don't know if he's impatient, I don't know if he's cynical, I don't know if it's just, I don't know if maybe it's an act of faith. Maybe he does say, but if you say so, I don't know. I don't know if it's an act of faith or if he's just humoring Jesus, but the point is, he does it. When Jesus tells him to do it, he does it. And what happens in verse 6?
Catch more fish,
Yeah,
More
a lot
than
of
they
fish.
can
How
handle.
many?
More than they can
2
handle.
nets full,
More than they can
Yes,
handle.
more than-
2, yeah.
filled the boats up.
Yep, they're filling the boats up, and it's so big the nets are breaking, so they get the second boat to come help, and even with 2 boats, the haul is so big that the boats start to sink. That's a lot of fish if the boats are actually starting to sink. So this catch of fish, it's clearly more than unusual. It's miraculous. Well, here's the last of Satan's 3 temptations answered. Remember how Satan started off by saying, if you are the Son of God, do this miracle by providing food for yourself, and Jesus wouldn't do it. But now right here, is he not doing that same kind of thing, like in spades? But it's in the Father's timing, the Father's way, and it's not for his benefit. It's in order to reveal who he is to the people who are there. So he's about the Father's timing and the Father's agenda, and so he does this miracle. And what's Peter's response?
He falls on his knees
Mm-hmm.
and depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord.
That's very interesting. First of all, he calls him Lord, not Master. It is a different word in the original, and it's weightier. When he calls him Lord, that's a heavier word that he uses. And then when he says, go away from me because I'm sinful, what do you think about that response?
He feels guilty because of his doubt.
Or is that a
Attitude.
Yeah.
Because it,
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's a couple things going on here. One, that Peter maybe knows the attitude he just had, what he just said to Jesus, and maybe it wasn't full of faith. And so it's like, he realizes he's on the spot now because of the way he spoke to Jesus. That might be part of it. Part of it, too, is I think he hasn't fully understood who Jesus is, but he's understood something is going on here where Jesus is not just a prophet. He's in a different category because you might expect Peter to say, oops, sorry about that. Sorry about the way, what I said just then. I was wrong. But that's not what he says. He says, I'm sinful. How does a miraculous catch of fish bring that kind of response from Peter, that I'm sinful? Because something in the authority and power of Jesus makes him realize whoever he's in the boat with, there's a divine inbreaking of God here. Whatever's happening right here, it's supernatural in the kind of way that brings Peter to his knees. And that's important because you know how all the other people have been responding to his miracles. They've all been amazed. But what you see with Peter is humility. That's an important difference, that Peter responds with humility, not just amazement, to say, I'm not sure that you and I should even be sitting together, because whoever you are, I don't think I'm worthy to be in your presence. He doesn't fully get it yet, and he won't fully get it until Acts, but he gets it enough to know that he's just seen the power of God in a really unique way, and Jesus is in a category all his own. Well, you remember Isaiah 61 about the blind receiving their sight? I think that's starting right here. And we're going to get to some physical miracles later where Jesus actually does physical healing of people who are blind. But I think you're starting to see the blind already starting to understand who Jesus is, because Peter's eyes are starting to get opened to realize Jesus is somebody more than just a miracle worker. So, this is the right response to one who's holy and divine, this kind of humility. It's also the first step toward discipleship. And you notice it's not just Peter. Who else is there?
The sons of Zebedee.
Yep, so James and John are there. They're actually partners with Simon in his fishing ministry, or his fishing job. So they've been out fishing with him, and having seen Jesus do what he did, well, things are never going to be the same for any of these 3 men. The whole direction of their life's about to change. Now, when Peter says, "Go away from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man," he's right. I mean, Peter's right. And when you think back on the Old Testament, you might expect Jesus, because he's the Holy One of God, to say, you're right, I'm holy and you're sinful and you should stay away from me. But that's not what he does. What does he do instead?
Dress close.
Yeah. For how long?
For his whole ministry.
For the duration of his ministry. It's not just, he doesn't just say, now don't be worried. I mean, he does say, don't be worried, don't be scared, but then he says, and you're coming with me. There's a profound change that's happening right here, because the incarnation is a seismic shift in the way a holy God relates to his people. So we saw this in Leviticus, this idea that the people have to keep their distance from a holy God because he's dangerous. But when the holy God comes in the form of a human being, something has changed. And now he's calling people to himself instead of saying, keep your distance. So he doesn't disagree with what Peter just said, that he's a sinful man and he's not worthy to be in the presence of Jesus, but Jesus nevertheless calls him to come with him. And what's he going to do from now on, Peter?
They're going to be fishers
Fisher
of
of
men.
men.
What does that mean?
Peter has no clue.
I don't think he knows.
That Jesus wants to build
Sharing
his
the
kingdom.
gospel.
Sharing the gospel and building the kingdom.
That's right. They're going to join in with Jesus in gathering people into his kingdom, bringing people out of the darkness. They're going to join in the ministry of Isaiah 61. He's going to call his disciples to take part in this ministry of release and freedom and calling people to God because they're making the kingdom of God known.
And these humble men had to have thought to themselves, how in the world am I ever going to do that?
Mhm.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, that's right. Now, what do the men do when Jesus says that?
They brought their boats to land and left everything and followed him.
Now, when
And
they,
they fed the crowd with all those
I was
fish.
going to say, when it says they left everything,
Yeah.
they just left that miraculous catch of
Yeah.
fish.
Yeah,
Think about how much money that was.
Yeah.
They just hit the lottery
yeah, no kidding.
and they walked away from it. Well, why would you do that? Because the voice of your shepherd calls you.
Mhm.
I'm not sure they even know why they left. I mean, they know Jesus is out of the ordinary and they want to go where he's going and see what's going to happen. But I think too, what you're seeing right here is when the voice of your shepherd calls you, you leave everything and you walk away.
Yeah.
Lots of people are going to follow Jesus without leaving everything. But these three men leave everything. They've got enough of an inclination of who Jesus is, and they're going to say, okay, whatever happens now, life is never going to be the same. So,
Can you imagine how those people swarmed those boats
I
about?
know.
And they left Jesus alone.
Yeah.
Because they're too busy with the fish.
Because he fed them.
Well, they're going to probably feed their families some with that fish, and all of their families might be thinking, what in the world are we going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, that miraculous catch of fish, you hope that there's a testimony in that to all of those people who they're not just eating the fish, but they're saying, wait a second, who is that guy?
Who was that? Yeah.
And look at all these fish. and-
That's right.
Yeah.
And will they come to the same point that Peter did? To not just say, we want more fish, but to say, whoever you are, okay, you get to command me now. That's a different response than what the crowds have been doing.
But Jesus in that other time said, you're following me because you want fed. But they want the wrong kind of food.
Yeah, they
That's
don't
right.
know
They
what
don't
he's
want the
feeding them.
spiritual food.
They want what Jesus can give them, but they don't want
Yeah.
Jesus.
Mhm.
That's right. So, so they pick up everything and they leave. They pull their boats up on shore. So here's the first disciples, Peter, James, and John, who left their fishing and now joined up with Jesus. Now, by the way, this is a side note, but if Jesus calls Peter to be a fisherman of people, consider just for a minute that this miracle might be more than just a demonstration of who Jesus is. It might actually be a prophecy. So what I mean by that is, Peter's going to join in Jesus' ministry, like right now. He's going to start doing this work, I think, of calling people into the kingdom. But we don't see that happening much in the book of Luke. We don't really see Peter bringing a lot of people into the kingdom. But there is a point where you do see it happen. Do you know where that is? When Peter brings in a miraculous catch of fish, and it's not fish, it's people.
The 5,000.
It's Acts chapter
With
2.
the Holy Spirit.
It's Acts 2 when the Spirit gets poured out and he stands up and preaches that amazing sermon. Jesus is off the scene, but he preaches this sermon and thousands of people get saved right there. Maybe this is a miracle that's pointing ahead to that. That not just to say that Jesus can bring in loads of fish through his power, but he can bring in loads of people through his power. If Peter's willing to trust him and follow the agenda and the timing of the Father. I mean, if you'd said to Peter, and you're going to bring thousands of people into the kingdom of God, I think Peter would have been like, what? But he's going to do that in one day when the power of the Spirit gets poured out.
It's sounding that it says after the resurrection and after what we're looking at is, that's all miraculous. It's after the work of the Holy Spirit and recognition of that and how it impacts someone.
That's right. Yeah. And it's not like there's not some hiccups along the way. One of the things that I find really interesting about this miracle is that then when you look at the end of the Gospel of John, do you know what James and John and Peter were doing at the end of the Gospel of John?
Cooking fish.
Before that, they were fishing, right? So Jesus had, I mean, he appeared to them back in, before that, but he's off the scene. They go back to Galilee, and when they go back to Galilee, they go back to fishing. Peter goes back to fishing. Now, you could just look at that and say, well, they're fishermen and they need to eat, so they're just going to go out and fish. That's how you get your food when you're a fisherman. That's fine. But when you think about Peter and what he did to Jesus, I suspect that when he went back to fishing, he assumed he was going to miss out on what he'd been called to, because he just stabbed Jesus in the back, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus goes to the Sea of Galilee, where Peter, James, and John are out fishing, and he does this miracle again. He does the miracle again of giving them a miraculous catch of fish. Why do you think he repeats this miracle for them at the end of John?
A reminder.
To remind them what?
That they're fishers of men.
That's right. I think he does it exactly to call to mind for them this account, and specifically to say to Peter, the call that he put on Peter's life didn't fail because because Peter failed. Jesus is going to do what he's going to do. He knew who Peter was when he called him, and he's still going to be a fisher of men. But not if he stays in that boat fishing. He's got to trust Jesus for what's coming. And I think that miracle is intended to say to Peter, the calling is still there. Get out of that boat and do what you've been called to do. And what's interesting is that when that miracle happens, they're out in the lake. They don't know who it is. They're seeing Jesus on the shore, and they don't yet know who it is. And Jesus does this miracle. And Peter, John says, Peter, at that, right then, when he sees that miracle, he jumps out of the boat and makes a beeline for Jesus. Like, okay. I mean, here's Jesus just pouring out mercy on Peter, calling him back to the mission that he gave him in the first place. But Peter's got to realize, doesn't he, that he's not the one who has the power to do it. Jesus is the one who has the power to do it, and he's going to do it through Peter. The failure doesn't disqualify him. The failure actually gives him the humility to now step up and rely on the power of God instead of on himself. Okay, do you have comments? Anything you'd like to add? Well, let me ask you, how's it relevant to us, any of this?
Well, I'm really touched by Christ's mercy, and that we need to give each other mercy instead of judgment.
It just, sometimes it's hard, I mean, you get what you think might be a call, but you don't know what that call really is. And then you think about it, and instead of immediately doing it, you think too much about it. And sometimes you end up not doing it, and then you're missing out. And we really should be answering the call when it comes out immediately, instead of putting it in our own human terms.
Waiting until it feels right for you. You shut down his call.
Right.
fishers of men in this life, in our own way.
Yep.
Because we go out among people and shine the light of Christ in our own small way, you know.
Well, and that's what we're intended to be.
I feel like there's a Sunday school song about that, but I can't think of it.
I will make you.
Yes, there it is, okay.
Fishers of men, fishers of men.
And why do we sing that in Sunday school, except that we're saying everybody is, I mean, if you're a disciple of Jesus, if you're a follower of his, you're called to bring other people.
This little light of mine.
All right, any last comments, anything you want to add?
Think about how muddy the whole scene in the synagogues were for the Pharisees and how they had really drifted away and made it more about the law versus, yeah. And how that would have been different to hear that Jesus who had just that authority and you're like, what's different about that? And I'm a skeptical person, so had he also said, like, well, I'm God, I'd be like, I think you're who we were warned against,
Yeah.
you know?
That's right.